Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, a Fox News poll finding 46% of American respondents feel President Biden is too liberal, up 10% since the end of 2019. Co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, Tom Bevan, weighs in on the polling data and ongoing negotiations over President Biden's infrastructure plan. A 32-year annual tradition returns this holiday weekend. Actor and co-host of the National Memorial Day concert, Gary Sinise, joins the Rundown to discuss this year's star-studded event and how it will honor veterans, first responders, and other American heroes. Plus commentary from syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor Cal Thomas. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Janice Dean.
I'm David Asman.
I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, May 28th, 2021. I'm Jessica Rosenthal. The president is expected to propose a massive budget plan today. The question, though, is how much support can he get from lawmakers and from voters?
For everything that you make a concession for to Republicans, that's going to anger some folks on the left in the House or the Senate and cause them to, throw up a roadblock.
I'm Chris Foster. The National Memorial Day concert Sunday night, once again hosted by the actor Gary Sinise.
I just can't imagine not being part of this concert. And I'm glad that we're carrying on even in light of the pandemic and not being able to do it live on the lawn of the Capitol.
And I'm Cal Thomas. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
President Biden is expected to unveil a roughly $6 trillion budget plan today for the next fiscal year. Analysts say under these spending plans, the national debt would surpass the record level set after World War II. While higher taxes are meant to help pay for it all, it will take more than a decade for those to offset this spending. And until then, annual deficits will soar. We've already heard a lot about what the president wants to spend on with the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. And while Republicans have said a lot of what Democrats are calling infrastructure is not infrastructure, there is some movement on possibly reaching some kind of deal. West Virginia Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito said the full Senate passed a water infrastructure package worth $35 billion. And this week, the Environment and Public Works Committee,
we passed a $316 trillion 5-year surface transportation bill. It has a lot of things that the president wants in there.
President Biden said Thursday before boarding Air Force One, he's hopeful for even more.
I had a good conversation, very brief, but a good conversation with Capito, Senator, and I told her she's going to contact me next week. I told her we have to finish this very soon.
There is a lot more in the president's spending plan. The question is, how much will he get passed? Will there be deal-making on other items like national paid leave and universal pre-K? Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had said he was 100% focused on stopping the administration, later clarifying that he's anxious to stop the president, depending upon the issue. On infrastructure, Republicans are making counteroffers.
Look, if Biden wants to back up his rhetoric about being a bipartisan leader and a uniter and all of that, this is the perfect opportunity for him to do that.
Tom Bevan is the president and co-founder of Real Clear Politics.
He could, if he were to accept this offer, I think he might be able to get enough Republicans to get something. Now, he's going to lose some Democrats probably, and then the focus shifts to the House and how many Republicans he can win there versus how many of the progressive caucus that he would lose or Nancy Pelosi would lose. And her margins are very, very thin over there. So I'm still skeptical, but I think if they got to an agreement on a number that, Republicans, at least some of them were comfortable with, it's possible. But I'm still skeptical that something's going to get done because it doesn't seem the political incentives are enough in line to make this thing happen, even now.
Okay, we're going to get into the political incentives in a bit, but we know a big part of what the president wants to spend on is infrastructure, and we've also heard for years that is something Republicans can get behind, as you just referenced. What do we know about what's in the competing proposals? Like, what's being taken out of the White House proposal to come down from that $2 trillion plus number? And what's in the Senate Republican proposal that they've added in to bring it up from that $568 billion?
So Republicans initially started out by saying, look, we just want to fund sort of what is traditional infrastructure, right? We remember the debate. The Biden administration said everything's infrastructure now, right? Home care and, daycare and all these things. And Republicans came with their initial offer saying, look, it's just roads, it's just bridges, it's just airports, and that's it. Now, Republicans have, in their new offer, they have increased their spending on those typical things, but also added, monies for, water, broadband, those kinds of things, which traditionally they haven't included as infrastructure. So I think in that sense, Biden sort of, his opening gambit of calling everything infrastructure did move the window a little bit and bring some Republicans along to compromise on the idea that there are some things outside of roads and bridges and airports that can be considered infrastructure and that are good, public works projects that will benefit people. So Republicans have come up there and Democrats, they've managed to, I think, come off the idea that absolutely everything is infrastructure. And so that's where the compromise can potentially be reached.
Well, we turn to you a lot to crunch numbers and look at data. What are you seeing across really the spectrum of polling that you look at, I guess in aggregate, about how Americans feel about the idea of spending this much money, and not just on infrastructure, right? Like on things like universal pre-K, childcare, the expanded child tax credit, things that, as you referenced, are in some cases being called infrastructure, but previously maybe weren't.
It's interesting. And this is one of those situations where you really have to tease out what's, behind the numbers, because it depends on how the questions are worded, right? Because, who doesn't, when you say you ask a question, do you want clean water? Of course, everyone wants clean water, right? It's easy. Do you want more spending on airports and roads and bridges? So the idea of spending money on infrastructure is popular. The idea of spending money on all of these different proposals is fairly popular. And then the question becomes, well, how do you pay for that and who's going to pay for it? And while there is support for Biden's his pay-fors, which are raising tax rates on corporations and those making more than $400,000 a year, beyond that, there was a Harvard-Harris poll that just came out. Mark Penn did a podcast I was just listening to earlier talking about how in his numbers, he found only 25% of folks approve of raising taxes in general. So there are some fault lines where these things, while on the surface they look popular and people say, of course we want, shiny bridges and airports. When you dig underneath the numbers a little bit, it becomes much more complex and not quite as clear cut in terms of how people are going to ultimately view this.
Tell me about what the data also shows about this, because I don't know, I haven't seen any recent polling data on this, but have we asked Americans, how do you feel about an annual deficit being $1.8 trillion? How do you feel about, the growing national debt of over what, like $30 trillion now? Does that factor into people's decisions, especially when, let's say 2022 rolls around, midterms roll around? Do people think in those terms because that seems far away, right? Or is it more like, hey, your immediate spending has immediately caused inflation and that's hurting my bank account? You know what I mean? Do people react? I imagine people would react more to the immediacy of their finances rather than the future debt or deficit.
That's right. It's very much, the debt and deficit. Look, people don't like that necessarily, but it is one of those things. It's in the abstract. It is not a concrete thing that is happening right now. And the idea that, if we had to pay the debt and deficit back tomorrow and we had to cut all these programs, then people would be like, wait, what are you talking about? I don't get my Social Security. I don't get all these benefits because we owe all this money. It would become a very real thing, but it very much is in the abstract. But to your point, when it becomes a drag on the economy, it becomes it triggers inflation, and it starts to really impact people by, increased prices of gas. And now we're talking about prices of lumber, which leads, and we've got a, red hot housing market. So it's tougher for people to, find places to live and the like. And their paychecks aren't going as far because food costs more. That becomes, and people see that in their daily lives, then it is an absolute, becomes a real immediate crisis.
Let's talk a little bit about how all of this gets passed, right? How any of this spending gets passed, because the president has said he does not want to deficit spend. He does want to raise taxes. Republicans have said no. We have heard a little bit of talk about a possible 25% corporate tax rate. Talk to me about how some of this spending might get passed without Republican support, in terms of reconciliation, how that might work. I know there's a limit on the number of times you can use reconciliation, right?
There is, although there appear to be loopholes. I mean, Chuck Schumer is like finding them, under the couch cushions and whatnot. But they could do this via reconciliation. Part of it, this is the other part of the equation, right? It's coming to agreement on, okay, what's the number? What can we agree on that we should be spending stuff on? And then how do you pay for it? And you're right. I mean, Republicans are not enthusiastic about going back on the Trump tax cuts and raising corporate rates and all these different things. So that is also going to be, is another reason that I'm not very optimistic that there's going to be any bipartisan agreement on this, because you just can't get enough agreement on the Republican side. And then again, it's one of those things. For everything that you make a concession for to Republicans, that's going to anger some folks on the left in the House or the Senate and cause them to, throw up a roadblock or whatever. And until, the devil's going to be in the details, and until these guys can all agree on something, it's going to be very, very hard to raise the money necessary to make the investments that Joe Biden wants to make.
Let's look ahead at 2022, because it's always about winning elections, right? And I wonder about these moves when you see Republicans and Democrats sort of saying, no, we want to come together, we want to do a deal. But then one side gets worried that the other side claims the win, right? And you want to be able to go into your election, into your race, either saying like, I reached across the aisle. Some people in Congress really seem like they like saying that line, like I'm somebody who reaches across the aisle and gets the deal done. But then you see others who use the opposite language. They're like, nope, we're gonna block this. We're gonna stand firm. We're not doing this. Does it depend on the issue? Like, is infrastructure one of those things that everyone might be happy to walk away and say they won? Like, even if it was Republican or Democrat, everybody wins? Or is it not dependent on the issue? Is it dependent on the district? Is it dependent on the congressperson and who their constituents are, that they block everything no matter what?
Traditionally, Congress people have wanted compromise, and they have wanted to be able to go back to their voters and say, look, I'm working on your behalf, and here are the things that I help do. I help sponsor these bills. I help bring this money back to the district that, help put that park over there and that, new school over there, or whatever the case may be. But increasingly, as we have seen, the midterms are nationalized around in this very polarized environment. And so, I don't think a lot of these members are as worried about going back to voters in 2022 and saying, I did all these things. They could be perfectly fine saying, look, I'm trying to protect you from this radical administration. Joe Biden said he was going to be a centrist and a moderate. He's not operating like that. And so, I'm standing there in the middle with my hand out, and nobody is reaching out to shake it. And I will continue to do that. And, that's not necessarily a bad message for Republicans in 2022. So in that sense, maybe the incentives are lined up to be more in favor of, if they can't get a deal they're comfortable with going back to their constituents, no deal is better than some sort of compromise deal that may not look so good back home.
Well, Tom Bevan, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Great to be with you.
This is Cal Thomas with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
The National Memorial Day concert started in 1989 as a way to honor and remember those who have given their lives for our country and to express appreciation for all veterans and troops serving now. Besides the music, there are tributes and real-life stories from throughout our nation's military history. The show used to be, and will be again, a free concert on the West Lawn of the United States Capitol building. Last year and this year, because of the coronavirus pandemic, the show's been produced using pre-taped segments and performances.
Well, it's we look at this as an opportunity to do something a little bit different, and the folks at Capitol Concerts really know how to do this show.
Gary Sinise is back as co-host of the concert. It airs Sunday night, May 30th on PBS, streaming online, and on the American Forces Network around the world.
Whether we're on the lawn of the Capitol or not, it's going to be a great show. They have tremendous cast, great entertainers that are part of the show this year. As always, I mean, they always have some fantastic people, but this year it's going to be just great no matter what. So I encourage everybody to tune in May 30th and on PBS and watch what we're doing. It's 90 minutes of salute and tribute to the men and women who have served and sacrificed for our country. It's really a special concert.
Yeah, looking at the lineup here, the music lineup, the National Symphony Orchestra, of course. For country fans, there's Vince Gill and Alan Jackson. There's the Four Tops and Gladys Knight. So plenty of great music, even if it's not in front of a live audience. Now, Gary, besides the music, there are 3 stories being presented during the broadcast. There's a tribute to the nurses of the Vietnam War. Now, 11,000 American women were stationed in Vietnam over the course of that war, and some of them died, right?
Well, yeah. We always personalize, the larger conflict through telling the story of individuals who served during a particular conflict. We have a story of a 21-year-old nurse. Can you imagine being 21 years old, serving as a nurse on the battlefield in Vietnam? The types of things that one would see and experience, and the bonds that were created between all the nurses at that time. There were, it's like over 200,000. I think it's 265,000 women served during the Vietnam era. So many. We tell a story of one of the nurses, Diane Carlson Evans, who. She's actually the founder of the Vietnam Women's Memorial in Washington, D.C., and we tell her story. She was 21 when she served over there, and that very personal single story represents the thousands of women who served in Vietnam and the thousands of nurses and the bonds that were created between all of them. It's really going to be a wonderful segment, and we have many wonderful segments coming up. This is, after all, the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And my co-host, Joe Mantegna, his first year with the show was 2002, the following year after the September 11th attacks, and they did a segment about several firefighters who had lost sons on that day. And Joe was one of the actors who did that particular segment, and that solidified Joe's commitment to the concert. And a few years later, he invited me to come and be a part of it. I was doing a lot of USO work, and I was taking my band around the country and overseas to the war zones and that kind of thing. And they did a segment on the USO in that particular show, and they wanted me to come and be a part of it with my band, so I did. But I also narrated some of the segments. In the following year, Joe and Jerry Colbert, the producer, they asked me to co-host the show, and that was 2005 that I brought my band. In 2006, I started co-hosting with Joe, and I've been doing it ever since. And every year, there are so many different stories that we tell, and every year it's like we can't possibly top this show. It's the best one we've ever done. And this is the 32nd year of the show. I know it's going to be equally as good, if not better, than all the other ones, but it's hard. Every year it's fantastic. They just do a fantastic job with the show.
Well, Joe, I read, said that he may have come first, but that you are the gold standard when it comes to hosting this kind of thing. He says that he is the sparrow to your eagle.
He's goofy.
Yeah.
He's my wingman, yeah.
Yeah.
Joe's great. He's a great friend. He loves our military. He loves our troops. He's an ambassador for my foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation, and has been for many years. Joe's. I always can count on Joe if I need something to help my foundation along, or an ambassador to go out and represent somewhere because I can't be there or something like that. Joe is as solid as they come. He's a wonderful, wonderful friend. We both had uncles who served in World War II. We've just been bonded for many, many years. We knew each other 40 years ago, but it was really the collective coming together at the National Memorial Day concert that just solidified our friendship in a way. And now, I just can't imagine not being part of this concert. And I'm glad that we're carrying on even in light of the pandemic and not being able to do it live on the lawn of the Capitol.
You mentioned your foundation. I was about to ask you about it. It's to help veterans and first responders. 10 years old now, right?
We're coming up on the end of our 10th year, June 30th. June 30th, 2011, I launched the foundation publicly at a big event at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and that's when our website went live, and we started asking for donations from the American people. And over the course of the last 10 years, our programs have expanded. The support from the American people has expanded, and now we've just raised hundreds of millions of dollars to support the men and women who serve our country. Last year, we had to shut down a lot of our travel because of the pandemic, but it didn't slow us down at all. We kind of shifted some of the things that we were doing, and we created a fundraising campaign called the Emergency COVID-19 Combat Service. We raised almost $1.5 million just for first responders and medical workers. We've supported just countless organizations and hospitals and first responder departments across the country over the years.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people over the pandemic who have foundations or charities, and they say, look, it's been a really tough year. So you're saying it wasn't that bad for you guys. One of the things that we wondered back in March of 2020 was what's going to happen to our funding. People are worried about the economy. Is the funding sources going to dry up, or what's going to happen? And there's two things that could have happened. People could have held on to their money and been very protective of that because of the economy. The other thing that could happen is that people wanted to be a part of the fight, and so often the way to do that is by supporting nonprofits who are operating in these areas. And we support first responders, military folks. We expanded to healthcare workers in hospitals. We work with the military hospitals all the time, so we ended up supporting about 90 different VAs across the country. So we just expanded our efforts, and we found that a lot of people wanted to find some way to be a part of the fight against this pandemic and what was going on in our country. And so we were able to continue on and do really well. And it's always an ongoing effort when you're talking about a nonprofit. We're asking the American people to support us. But I think if you want to support veterans, we're one way to do that. And healthcare workers and first responders, you can go to the Gary Sinise Foundation website, and you can go to the National Memorial Day Concert website as well, where several nonprofits supporting veterans are listed on the website. Gary, real quick, film and TV production look like it's starting to really storm back. Have you had a chance to get any work done? Your friends, have you heard anything about what it's like on a set these days?
Yeah, there's a lot of COVID-19 protocols and everything like that, but a lot of productions are just firing away and getting a lot done. It's just a little bit different than it used to be, and they create these bubbles and things like that. I don't know what's going to happen now that things are loosening up and things are coming more under control and, all this stuff. But I've just been focused on my foundation work and things here at home lately. Eventually I'll get back to something.
Gary Sinise, actor, founder of the Gary Sinise Foundation, co-host with Joe Mantegna of the PBS National Memorial Day Concert. That's also streaming on YouTube and Facebook, so plenty of ways to see it. Gary, thanks for coming on. Congratulations on another great year of the concert.
Thanks so much for having me.
New from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
My name is Kennedy, and welcome to my podcast, which will, I humbly say, single-handedly save the world. You're welcome.
It's Kennedy Saves the World. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
Ohio's Vax-A-Million COVID-19 vaccine incentive program is paying off big. That's the program in which permanent Ohio residents who are adults and get at least one shot of a COVID-19 vaccine are eligible to win $1 million. Younger folks are also getting in on the winning, and those aged 12 to 17 who get COVID shots are eligible to win a full-ride scholarship to any state school in Ohio. It's also inspired similar vaccine incentive lotteries in Colorado, Maryland, New York State, and Oregon. Abigail Buginski is Ohio's first $1 million winner.
I was completely surprised when I got the call, and I still can't believe it.
Joseph Costello, who just finished 8th grade, is the first college scholarship winner. His mom, Colleen, says she was overwhelmed upon hearing the news.
I was really thankful at that moment that there was a bench nearby because I needed to sit down.
The vaccine lottery seems to be working, too. The number of people in Ohio, age 16 and older, who received their initial COVID-19 vaccine jumped 33% in the week after the state announced its $1 million incentive lottery, according to an Associated Press analysis. So far, more than 2.5 million Ohio adults have signed up for the $1 million prize, and more than 104,000 kids aged 12 to 17 entered the drawing for the college scholarship, which covers tuition, room and board, and books. More winners will be announced in each contest on Wednesdays through June 23rd. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Cal Thomas.
What's on your mind?
Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas is reportedly considering the development of tools that would help America's children discern truth from lies and know when they are being fed disinformation. The Washington Times, which first reported the story, says a department spokesperson declined to give details, but that more information would be revealed in the coming weeks. Mayorkas might want to start by fact-checking his recent claim that the U.S. southern border is closed. He made the statement when news pictures showed waves of people crossing the border. Should kids believe him or their lying eyes? Should anyone, regardless of political party or persuasion, be comfortable with government telling especially children what they can believe and whom they can trust? This is what totalitarian states do. It's called propaganda. We're already inundated with political correctness, cancel culture, and wokeism. TV networks spend more time delivering opinion and slanting stories to particular points of view than what once resembled, if not objective journalism, then at least fairness. The list of government officials who have lied is long and dates back to the founders of the nation. Some lies could be defended on national security grounds. Others were used to cover up wrongdoing or enhance the image of the one who lied. George Orwell was prescient when he wrote in 1984 about newspeak and the Ministry of Truth. We have already achieved the former in what we are allowed to say or not say, lest we be smeared with nasty rhetorical stains. Let's revisit the Ministry of Truth for those who haven't read the book or need a reminder. The Ministry of Truth was related to newspeak in that it had nothing to do with truth, but propaganda by another name. Its job was to falsify historical records in ways that align with government policies and its version of those events. It was also tasked with defining truth, which sometimes resulted in doublespeak or contradictions that served the purposes of the state. Truth has become subjective and relative in modern times and is now personal. You have your truth, and I have.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.